Good afternoon and welcome to Friday Live. My name is Lenny. Today I am delighted to introduce you to film director, producer, scriptwriter and actor Peregrine Kitchener Fellows. A special welcome to everyone watching across our authentic education academies today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenny, and a big round of applause, please, for Peregrine. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for coming. I thought we were going to be in that little library with about 4 or 5 of you, so this is terrifying. Mr. Chutter asked me originally to come and talk to you today about becoming an actor. I don't really know much about becoming an actor, so that wasn't ideal. But what I do know about is working in the creative industries more broadly. And so hopefully today I can tell you something you don't already know. Don't take anything I say as the ultimate literal advice on any given topic. I'm giving you a very brief and vague set of thoughts based on my experience that may or may not, probably not, be interesting. And that's all I'm doing. I've worked in the film business one way or another for nearly 20 years. I started as an office runner on summer holidays when I was about the same age as some of you in here. I went to university where I learned very little, although I did learn a bit. And then I became a runner on film sets, an assistant director, a producer's assistant, and then what I am now, a producer. So I've seen things from every layer. Before I go on, I think it's important, someone already mentioned this, for me to explain my own entry into the business, which is not applicable to everyone, although also not very unusual in the business. That I was very lucky because my father is a writer and he was an actor, and he gave me a great sense of what was expected and required from me in the movies from a very young age. Actually, he was quite keen for me to become a banker, as many of your parents will be. But instead I went to be a frustrated filmmaker, and he quickly realized it wasn't a battle worth fighting, as I was really only cut out for one thing. The thing about having that experience and insight is that it doesn't necessarily make you any better or cleverer, certainly not in my case, but if you can make it work, it does give you a good idea of what direction to take, where to apply, what to do, and who to find to help you. These are all things I'm asked about quite a lot, and so that's the thing that I really want to talk about today. I hope that maybe at the end of this, if you are thinking of a career in the arts or anything else, you might think about it from a slightly different perspective and not just focus maybe on those headline positions that we've all heard of. I've mentioned already a few jobs that I myself have held, and I imagine they're things you might have seen on the credits of a film, but don't necessarily know what they entail. So I thought what might be quite interesting is basically just to take you through the process of actually making a film from soup to nuts. And I hope as I go through it, there are things, whether it's art or military or acting or English, that you may realize are applicable. So every project begins with the development process, and that starts with an idea, whether that's a book, a news article, a true story, or something you just made up. But anyone can read something and have an idea for a film. What you need in order to take that to the next level is a writer, preferably quite a good writer. So usually what happens is someone, a producer, and they come in all shapes and sizes, takes on a writer to work out their source material into a proper script. There is another route, of course, which comes straight from a writer. Writers, in order to practice and to show what they can do, will often write a spec script, essentially something they haven't been paid to do, but that is entirely of their own making, their own idea, their own style, their own tone, their own length, everything, and theoretically is the best illustration of their ability. The screenwriting process, which may be of interest to anyone interested in English particularly, but storytelling more generally, is very interesting, and there are a million ways to write a script. Some people can just sit down at a laptop and work a regular day. Others will stay up late and write all night. Then there are lots of ways you can attack the inevitable writer's block when it comes. Tony Gilroy, who wrote the Matt Damon, Jason Bourne films and Andor and Rogue One, he walks through New York thinking about his idea and doesn't go home until he works out what to do next. When Aaron Sorkin, who wrote The West Wing, has writer's block, he takes a shower and gets dressed in clean clothes as if he's starting the day again. James Graham, who wrote the show Sherwood, that's just been on TV, when he gets blocked, he just switches to writing something else. The point is, whatever works is the way to go. As with everything I'm talking about, and I think everything more generally, there is no right way to do it. There are lots of right ways, I should probably say, in a school. That's probably a better thing to say. The writing process goes on for years. It can go on for years and be full of trials and tribulation. It can involve screaming rows and sleepless nights. It can be tedious beyond belief. But for the sake of today, we needn't go into how difficult writing is, though it is. Once there's a script that everyone is happy with, the producer goes out and raises the money to make the film. Now, this can come from private equity investors or big studios or public entities like the BFI. This is by far the worst part of the process, but is a fairly essential skill. One thing nobody tells you when you're starting out in the film business, or practically anything that you will do when you go into the workforce, is how incredibly important being able to raise money can be. I'm hopeless at it. A producer because of that, a producer is always working on multiple projects at once in the vain hope that something might stick. So once you have your script and you have your money and your backing that you need, this is when pre-production can begin. Maybe I should ask for this. Does anyone have any questions? Is anyone still awake at this point? Anyone thinking about writing? Pre-production? No. Fine. Pre-production is the period leading up to the filming. It involves setting up offices and hiring crew, all while working out where you're going to film, what you need, and how you're going to do it all. The vital players in this period are the production team. Now, of course, your directors and producers are working with their heads of department to work out what will be in front of the camera, but it's the people in the production office that have to work all this out logistically. It's the production coordinator, the assistant coordinator, production secretary, and the PAs that run this, and is the best place to get started in the film business. It's long hours, hard work, and does require a certain amount of resilience, which I see printed on all the walls of this place. Which I should have worked in a little bit better, but it's also where you start to learn what to do, and most importantly, it's where you begin to have contact with people on the crew. And one of the most important elements of any film career is the relationships you build throughout. So you've got your production team working away, but this is also the time that all your other departments come together. And I thought I'd run through a few of the main creative departments for you, starting with the art department. Your art department is responsible for your sets and the general look that you'll be capturing on camera. The department tends to include a diverse variety of skills, from draftsmen that are coming up with sketches to those building and painting sets. Then there are people making the props. This is a pretty fascinating part of the job and requires remarkably skilled craftsmanship. I worked on a few of the Star Wars films, and every now and again I had to take visitors around the studio, and always the main thing anybody wanted to see was the prop department. No matter how old they were, everyone wants to play with a lightsaber. Then we have the costume team. They're coming up with concepts for everything worn in the film. For contemporary films, they're going out and finding clothes that can be mixed and matched to tell the stories of the characters and to contribute to the feel and look of the film. On some films, you also have huge teams of people actually making the costumes. Then you're also putting together your hair and makeup team. Every actor you see in a film has spent an inordinate amount of time in the makeup chair. It's not always obvious, and that's kind of the point. But sometimes you're making people look glamorous and magical, and sometimes you're messing people up and making them look like they've been dragged through a hedge or beaten up or whatever it is. And whatever they do and what happens in the makeup chair is to help the actor inhabit their role and the audience to believe what they're watching. I always think one of the things about the makeup chair that goes kind of unsung is that's the first place that the actor will be, first place they'll be when they get to work, and the last place they'll be before they get on set. And so whatever happens to them in that chair is really going to set the tone for the whole day. So your makeup artists and your hairstylists really hold the key for the behavior and the, the excitement, the enthusiasm of the actor that they have literally in the palm of their hands. once your pre-production is over, and actually this is never the case, everything should be more or less in order for your shoot. And depending on the size of your production or the length of the film, this can go on for a very long time. The hours are crazy and the work is intense, but in my opinion, it's a pretty amazing thing to do and not something that many people get to experience. So we're very lucky. Filming really revolves around your camera team. The camera team are always the cool kids on set, lots of leather boots and beards. They are led by the director of photography, or the cinematographer, they're sometimes known, who's really responsible for the look of the film. So the lighting, the choice of camera lenses, and the way the camera moves. Around the cinematographer is a team of people working on the focus. If you're shooting on real old film, you've literally got somebody twisting a thing to make sure everything is in focus. Now, of course, it can be kind of altered a bit in post-production, but with CGI or visual effects stuff. But really, you've still got these amazing artists that can, just from looking, know how to keep things in focus. Then you have people preparing the camera, making sure it's working, your kind of runners in this department are called camera trainees. The great thing about a trainee is that you get to work on lots of different productions, assuming you're any good at the previous one. And you meet a ton of people, and like every department, you're building your relationships right from the beginning. From the very first day on the very first film, you are leaving a mark with different people that you're going to cross paths with for the rest of your time in the business. And a trainee will very easily work their way up through the department over some years, sometimes a lot of years, sometimes not so many. The camera department work very closely with the grip team. People always wonder what a grip is and what they actually do. I'm not sure I'm going to explain it very well. But they're really the people handling the camera, the stability and literally the movement of the camera and how it is standing wherever it is standing. So they build structures on which the camera sits, from a tripod to a complex dolly. The dolly is something, it's like a little steam engine or something, like the bottom of a train. And it can be put on rails, the grips put together all the rails, and lots of spirit levels and wedges, and this can go on for hours and hours and hours. But it means the camera can move smoothly during a scene. They're a tough bunch. The camera team also relies on the lighting team. This team is full of technicians and electricians who can wire anything. When you're watching something, you can often see various practical lights, which will be made with the art department. I'm looking for one now, these in the ceiling. But the lighting team is also working on lights that you can't see as well. And different lights can totally change what you're doing, create totally different tone and style. I mean, actually, in this room, we've got pretty good examples of what those would be all over the place. Obviously, I'm not talking about everyone in the filmmaking process, but I hope this does give you some idea of how different skills and interests might be useful in the creative arts, and how, if you're interested in any of this, you might be able to fit in. The great thing that you guys have now, which has really never existed ever before, is the ability to find people and opportunities online. I mean, you can tailor your dream path based on your interest and expertise, and no previous generation has been able to. I don't think that's inherently going to make for a better experience overall, but I do think it's going to help when you're looking for specific ways into any of these roles. Before I move on from production, and actually the group that plays literally the most important role on a film set are the assistant directors. Now, often when people talk about that, you assume we're talking about people that are getting the director his lunch or his cups of coffee or whatever, and it couldn't be further away from that. The first assistant director is really the person running your set in the middle of the room with the radio, telling everyone what to do all day long. The first is responsible for scheduling the movie and on a day-to-day basis that everything is going efficiently and as planned. All about timing. They have the help of a second AD who's responsible for going around to every department, everyone working on the film, to make sure that tomorrow's work is going to go as planned. And that's including like drivers working out that it's going to take slightly longer to come tomorrow, and so the actor needs to be picked up 10 minutes earlier, or hair and makeup saying that actually that tiara took a little bit longer to put in than we thought it would, or whatever it is. I can't think of anything else, but you will. Then the third AD tends to be on set, backing up the first, and just making sure everything goes to plan, using specifically the set PAs. And everyone's on radios together, so everyone's talking on radio. It can be very annoying because most people are not very good at using the radios, but that's how everyone. It's like a military operation, and the set PAs. I mean, that's really. In a way, it's the most fun you'll ever have on a movie. It's kind of the hardest work, but you're being kind of beaten into submission every single day. But you also have almost no responsibility whatsoever, which kind of makes it the best part of any working life, really. I loved doing it. I didn't do it for very long. Wasn't very good at it. But you're basically getting lunch. You can do anything from getting lunches to escorting actors to set to stopping nearby traffic so that no noise can be heard when you're recording. And for a lot of people, well, if any of you are interested in doing this kind of thing, you will end up doing that. And and you'll have a good time. One thing I haven't really talked about, and I'm sure is a thing that interests most of you, is acting. I know acting is very attractive to people and can obviously be the most amazing experience, but it's so difficult. I won't say but, and it's so difficult. I wouldn't tell anyone not to do it, but I will say that before you decide to make that your life, make sure that there isn't anything else that you can do. You have to be, and I'd say this for writers as well, and I'm sure there are other departments of whom this is relevant, so resilient and prepared for disappointment and humiliation at all times. It can be a nightmare, but of course the possibilities are extraordinary and enormous. And it really is the place where dreams do still come true. I mean, if that's something that you feel really so passionate about and hopefully have a bit of skill and a bit of luck in, it can be the most extraordinary life. So we film our film, we have it in the can, and we get onto editing. I think this is kind of the best bit. You have everything you filmed, and now you have to work out how to put it together. There's this brilliant moment when you think you know it all. You've worked on the script, you were there when it was filmed, you've watched the rushes, which is the day's filming that you look at the end of the day or the next morning, and maybe you've seen a bit of it cut together. And you think you know everything, you know every angle, you know the point of every scene. And then suddenly you come in and your editor has changed something, changed a few frames, cut something out, added something in, put a bit of music, bit of sound, whatever it is, and the whole thing comes to life again. And it's a completely new experience. Your editor is really rewriting your film, but instead of using words on a page and their imagination, they're working with a very finite. It's more like sculpting, I guess. And it's a wonderful part of the process. I'm not sure what you really need to be a great editor, but I'd say it's probably first and foremost an interest in storytelling, good imagination, and willing to try things, and also a certain level of technical proficiency, because now you're using all kinds of different computer programs, and now everyone wants to talk about AI and all of that stuff, which if you want to go into that end of things, I think, again, in any business, you've all got to work out how to use this AI thing that's scaring everyone my age. But yeah, so that's a wonderful part of it. And I think also now what's interesting, and a few of you do this a lot, you can edit so much on your phones. I mean, obviously you can film so much on your phones. I mean, we all thought that really good lenses on the cameras was going to make everyone suddenly interested in making films. In fact, that doesn't seem to have happened at all. But kind of the amount of, what would you call it, reality content online or whatever, has obviously boomed. And a huge part of that is editing. And I mean, even if you watch just trying to pick out a young person reference from my head, if you look at a Logan Paul video or a KSI video or whatever it is, they are cut so specifically and so efficiently, and actually tend to be, for example, a Logan Paul, to a very specific formula that works. And when you mess with that formula, suddenly it doesn't work, and suddenly you have a video that's only watched by 20,000 people instead of 20 million people, and that's all to do with editing. And then once you put your film together, which can take months, you get your music on the picture. Film music obviously involves so many different people working on different parts of the process, from session musicians that are playing and recording in places like Abbey Road or Air Studios. Then there's the composers, who are probably the one people you might actually have heard of, John Williams or Michael Giacchino or Maurice Jarre. And then there's countless sound technicians and people that are very much more proficient in music than I can even explain. I'm nearly there, don't worry. Once your film is done, you've got to get it out into the world. I won't go into the ins and outs of film distribution. We don't have time, and I've already bored you enough. However, there is another element of a film's production that is vital and creative. That is everything around the release of the film, which requires dedicated PR agencies who oversee the production of reams of artwork to accompany your film and to sell it to people, as well as the traveling all over the world to promote the film, which can be pretty exhausting, but I think it is a huge reward when you work on the kind of film that anyone, A, wants to see in a different country, and B, wants to pay for you to travel to that country. And it can be pretty amazing, however tiring it gets, even when you're going on Boxing Day, flying from England to Tokyo, to Copenhagen, to San Francisco in a week. It's still pretty great. Not that you necessarily always know that in the moment. And then what have I written here? There's less career advice as it is life advice. Once you've been through all those years of developing your scripts, all the preparation, the filming, the post-production, and the release of the film, you get a feeling that lurks over you that even after all of that, it's time to do another one. And all the early mornings, the late nights, and bad-tempered battles are all forgotten, and one gets the hideous feeling that they need to do another one. Now, of course, that doesn't come to everyone, and you quickly find whether you're cut out for this one way or another. But if you are bitten by the bug, then you're in for an adventure. And then one thing I haven't talked about is the role of a director, which is obviously very seductive to people as well. If the producer is responsible for everything behind the camera and overseeing the vision, then the director is responsible for what is in front of it and responsible for that vision. The director is drawing all the elements together and making sure that they are creating a singular, specific world. Some people are better at this than others. In my experience, the best directors are the great communicators, as well as the ones who can keep a strong eye on their vision in spite of any chaos and difficulty thrown at them. These are, of course, skills that we should all be developing anyway, whether we want to direct a film or not. And that's about it, really. So you're going to ask me some questions, but I don't know what more I can say other than I don't want to be too make it sound too disheartening becoming an actor or whatever, but it is a pretty amazing, I say it to include everything creative. It is an amazing choice in life, but it comes with its negatives as well. But
Thank you very much, Peregrine. And can I just ask you, kick off with a question really, which is about what do you feel about the landscape for performing arts currently in this country and internationally, really?
Well, I mean, I haven't talked about theatre at all, and I'm not. I know more about film and television than I do about working in theatre, but it does seem to me that it's a very tough time for theatre outside of major cities in this country. And obviously that's really the bedrock on which our film industry is based. I think also our culture is based. So maybe that's a wider, more complicated question. But honestly, when I started doing this, people were saying all the same things they're saying now. And it's tough. It's really difficult here. And we have really such a small industry. It's a lot bigger than it was then. There's more, the film studios now everywhere. Pinewood Studios is 5 times the size as it was when I started working there 10 years ago, whatever it was. And so, yeah, it's always tricky. It's tough. And in the end, governments are not going to prioritize the arts. It never happens. I wonder now if, we have a government that seems to be interested in the arts in a way that maybe the previous one had given up hope on. But we'll see.
Do you feel that, so just as a segue to that, really, do you feel that the pandemic had a great impact really on the arts across our country and further afield?
Yeah, and around the world for sure.
Yeah.
I think, like every business, we haven't really worked out how not to be sitting in an office together and be efficient and proficient. The big thing that changed, now you do make a lot of the process I was talking about. The great thing about making a film is you're all often just in one room, working in every different department, and you can shout at each other and ask people questions and whatever it is. And even though now it's so much easier to ask people things, you can text them, iMessage, WhatsApp, whatever. I got to send 4 WhatsApps to answer a question that I could just turn to you and ask, or whatever it is, and that all builds up, and you do lose a sense of community, I think, which I'm sure, have all felt in the last 5 years. That's different from before. I mean, also just the financial aspect of it. That cinemas, actually, cinema had a good year on paper last year, but cinemas are closing all around this country, certainly, but all around the world. And do people still want, and because COVID was a massive boost for streaming, and we all suddenly discovered Prime Video, Netflix, Mubi, never mind BBC iPlayer, ITVX, 4OD, 5 on Demand, Tubi, whatever, Quibi. At one point, that's gone now. But do we really want to go to the cinema and pay 3 times what we pay for our monthly subscription? I do, and everyone should. And actually, one of the things that I didn't even say is that if you are interested in anything creative, make sure that you are making the most of what's out there, and that you really are reading and you really are watching stuff. Whatever it is, even if it is Logan Paul, watch people being creative and watch what's out there and be aware of what's out there, and watch movies. I'm always now you guys might disagree with me, but I'm so surprised by how few movies people watch.
Yes. I'm a great Mike Leigh fan. I love his work. I always have done. I don't know, I'm just obsessed with Mike Leigh and all his films. But I tried to see his latest film, but I could only actually locate it at Wareham, I think it was. It wasn't showing in Dorchester or here. It was only in Wareham. So it was obviously quite sort of a niche sort of market.
Well, and I'd say a film, if talking about getting into creative industries and stuff, there's probably no better film for that experience in Topsy Turvy.
Oh, yes.
If you can get that on DVD or your local iPhone.
And do watch Abigail's Party, which is a great one. I'm going to pass over to the students now. So we have some questions in the audience, and we're over to here. Thank you very much.
What are the challenges you found making a career in the arts?
So I think what Mark has touched on, the landscape of financially and in terms of putting movies out is pretty wretched. And trying to, I haven't even really talked about this, but my main focus really is kind of your classic independent British, Mike Leigh inspired movies. And that size film has really disappeared from the industry because your return on investment on a £3 million film, which might be about people's social issues, whatever it is just so little. And of course, there are people that are very good at making the most of that and selling it around the world. And when a movie does well, it's a great way to make money. But they've kind of disappeared. And actually, the previous government have, probably not what you're looking for in the answer, but the previous government have introduced, and I think has been brought in, a new kind of tax incentive for films between 1 million and 15 million pounds, because it just became it has become an almost impossible size movie, even though every movie any of us will mention, lots of people will mention, are these small, authentic, real films that we love. So I'd say that. And then the other thing is, on the one hand, working with other people is the best thing in the world. On the other hand, working with other people is the worst thing in the world. And working with really terrible people is probably one of the worst bits.
Could you tell us more about Star Wars?
So Yeah. So I worked on a few of the Star Wars movies for a few years. What a lot of people don't realize about Star Wars is they're more or less all made in London, in West London, and then you travel around the world for different things, but mostly they're based at Pinewood near Uxbridge. And so that was my first real. I worked on those films as a producer's assistant, so I was working for the people that were kind of overseeing everything, and a lot of toing and froing, doing people's deeds. But it was a pretty extraordinary experience. And I mean, my first cinema experience that I can remember is going to see Empire Strikes Back at the Winchester Cinema when they restored them in the end of the 90s. And when my first day working for a new producer on one of those films, I was told to go to a meeting on C stage at Pinewood. And I went in not knowing anything. I hadn't looked at scripts. I didn't know anything about the film, which was The Last Jedi. And I walked on set and I found myself in the middle of the Millennium Falcon. And in those moments, you do feel like, I mean, now I'm a bit more jaded and I probably wouldn't care, but you do feel like you are living out some dream. And it is amazing. And they're great, fun movies to work on. And it is pretty extraordinary when you're working on things where there's no kind of obstacles to what they want to do or whatever it is, and traveling around the world and all the rest of it. And it's also nice when you are working on movies, most of the time you're working on films nobody's ever heard of because they don't exist yet. And so when you go home and you tell people you're working on Star Wars, it's nice for people actually to be interested for once.
What is the one piece of advice you would suggest going into the arts?
The one piece of advice I would suggest. Sorry, I was asked this before and I was going to come up with a good answer, but I haven't really. The one piece of advice I guess I would give is just to remember that everyone you meet, everyone that's nice to you, everyone that's rude to you, anyone that you think is insignificant or too important, whatever it is, every relationship you make is vital. And you don't know where your opportunities are going to come from. You don't know where this person's going to go. I mean, this is life advice, really, which would be nice to everyone. But just remember how important the community is and how important people around you are, and never take that for granted. Even, from drama school to when you win your Oscar and someone is rude to you backstage, whatever. It's all about people. And community. I said that about directors and communication. I think life's all about being a good communicator and about being able to get what's in here out there. And so I don't know how you manifest that particularly, but I think just being open to everything, being friendly, and watching stuff. Like I say, I think you should watch stuff. I mean, it's remarkable now when you meet young actors who are trying to get into the business who don't know who Mike Leigh is, or don't know that Ridley Scott made movies before Gladiator, or don't know that there are old Star Wars movies. Whatever it is, it's crazy. And there's so much to mine out there. There's so many things to learn from, whether it's somebody that you specifically admire or someone you've never heard of, and it's an English film or a German film, whatever. I think that would be a big part of it.
So do you think then that having that foundation is really important? So reading, going to the cinema, going to the theatre, that exposure to the theatre is really important, isn't it?
Yes, and I think, like I said at the beginning, I think the main thing with all of this is just to think about things from a slightly 90-degree angle. That you can go to a theatre and learn just as much about working on a movie as you can from going to film school or whatever. And yeah.
Wonderful. Have we got a question over here from Cameron? Here we are.
How will AI affect the filmmaking in the years to come?
So I think AI is obviously terrifying for every newspaper or magazine or website you read. I mean, actually, AI is already embedded in our business, as it is, I'm sure, in lots of others. The way that we The way that editing tools work uses a lot of AI. The way that sound tools work uses a lot of AI. There was a big kind of scandal for the Oscars this year because a movie called The Brutalist used a specific kind of technology where the editor, who was Hungarian, used his accent to be merged with Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones, who play Hungarian characters in the film, and people were outraged by it and whatever. But the truth is, we have been manipulating all this stuff forever. My main concern, I'm definitely not to make it sound like it's not a bad thing, because I'm a big doom monger on AI, but my main fear is that we get to a point where you can go home and you can say to your TV, I'd like to watch a film about Martians starring Mr. Chutter, and I want it to be 20 minutes long and be really funny. And by the time you've made a cup of tea and sat down, that movie's been created for you. And I think that kind of entertainment will probably be good enough for a lot of people, but it will, like all these things, drag us more and more into a kind of our own worlds. And I hope that doesn't happen, because I think that, opera didn't go away. I haven't been to opera for a long time, but opera's still there, and people pay a lot of money to go, and they take their picnics and they love it, and theatre is the same. And so I don't think film will disappear in that way, but it might become, I can definitely see a world where it becomes much more of a luxury than it is now. But the truth is, people have been telling stories and sitting around a campfire since the beginning of time. So AI is just the next step.
Lovely. And on that note, can I just thank Peregrine for a wonderful talk today, and thank you to our audience here at Way Valley Academy, and also to all of the academies, everyone watching at home and in schools. And thank you so much for this wonderful talk today. Thank you. Round of applause, please, for Peregrine.